Please pray with me. Gracious God, may the meditations of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be a pleasing offering to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. About 3 months ago, it finally caught up with me. I got COVID for the first time. Now, fortunately, it wasn't too severe. It mostly was just like a bad cold. Though I did lose the ability to smell and taste certain things, after all, who knew that a quarter pounder from McDonald's could taste like vinegar? That was fun. I was determined to recover as quickly as possible. I spent a lot of time resting. I was determined to recover as quickly as I could, but there was work to be done. I came down with the illness on a Sunday and I stayed home on Monday, but the next couple of days I was trying to get the liturgy done for Sunday so Kathy could have it put into the bulletin and so Janet would be able to pick the songs. In fact, I think I did get it done. I think I did.
We didn't like it.
No, they didn't like it. Just goes to show you gotta be careful what you do when you're sick. It would have been fabulous. It would have been great. And we would have had communion too. After all, it was the first Sunday of September, after all. But I was still so very tired. I could barely do anything. I would be nodding off when I was at my computer trying to write. And I think Kathy sensed that I was not really getting better as fast as I thought I was getting better because she kept suggesting that I not preach that Sunday. And I kept saying, no, I'll be better by then. I'll be better than then. And like many of us, I have that little voice in my head that says, you can't let people down and you can't inconvenience others. You got to do this. This is your job. Leading and worshiping and preaching, that's what I'm paid for. But finally, after a day or two of that, I was just too weak and tired. And Kathy wrestled me to the ground and forced me to realize that I had to sit Sunday out. And you know what? It was perfectly fine. In fact, I hear Kathy did a great job. I may have to get sick more often just to give her the opportunity to preach more often. Now, our first reading was from Isaiah 64, and that begins with a lament. And a lament is just a fancy word for a prayer that expresses sorrow, pain, or confusion. This text comes from a time after the Babylonians had destroyed Jerusalem, and it was either while the Babylonian exile was still in place or shortly after the Jewish people were allowed to return to their homeland. Either way, everything that they held to, everything they thought they knew and believed has been destroyed. And the people are praying for redemption. They are crying out to God to tear open the heavens, to make the mountains smoke and the earth tremble, just like God did in the old days. But the text nevertheless expresses confidence in God and asks for forgiveness. It doesn't stay in that lament mode. It moves to understanding of God's constant presence and God's faithfulness. Our second passage is from 1 Corinthians, and this passage includes a greeting and an opening prayer, which are two things that Paul includes in his letters. And the prayer was written to speak to the situation that Paul is addressing in his letter. Notice that in that letter, confidence and reassurance figure prominently. The promises of God's faithfulness and that Jesus Christ will strengthen his followers to the very end. They are urged to be faithful, knowing that God can be faithful and to be trusted to the end. Now, our gospel reading may have seemed a little strange to read during Advent season. After all, it's an apocalyptic text about the end of history. So what is that doing on the first Sunday of Advent? Well, that is a little reminder that Advent is a time for Christ's coming, first as a baby, but second as a triumphant ruler. We often forget that second part. And this passage is often referred to as Mark's little apocalypse because it deals with the end times very similarly to what the book of Revelation does. Mark was written around the year 70, when Jerusalem and the temple had been destroyed again, although this time by the Romans. So again, for Jews and Christians, this was a traumatic event. Their world came crashing down. Jerusalem and the temple had been so central to everything that they knew and believed, and now it's gone. And the end hasn't come yet. They all kept thinking the end was going to come soon, but it hasn't come yet. And yet many are claiming to be Jesus returned. And so in that context, Mark's answer is, when Jesus does return, the signs will be unmistakable. They'll be unmistakable. Nevertheless, we are to stay alert and we are to stay awake, which means that we are to be faithful to our work and to witness. Well, so what do we do with these texts this Sunday? We have a prayer of lament, followed with a statement of confidence in God's saving power in Isaiah. In 1 Corinthians, we have reassurance of God's promise to save through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And lastly, we have an apocalyptic story in Mark that talks about the end of time and urges us to remain ever alert and ever awake. You can see how those texts build on one another, because before we can live faithfully, we need to express our grief. And we need assurance of God's saving power. Then we need to express our confidence in that power and stop looking towards the heavens for Jesus to return, because now we're finally ready to start living the life of a Christian. We're ready to uphold the standards that Jesus set for us. We don't just look towards the heavens, because we're to be actively engaged in the work of ministry. And that's what stay alert and stay awake mean. We're not constantly fretting about Jesus' return. Rather, we're actively doing the work that Jesus commanded us to do. We're building up our faith through the spiritual practices, caring for those in need, advocating for the vulnerable, witnessing to the wondrous things that God has done in our lives. And we're to always be doing this, never taking a break. Keep pushing on no matter what. But then you think about my little story a little bit ago. What about when you're sick and you're faltering? What about when you're tired? What about when you have a zillion other things to do? Chris, how is that possible? How can we keep pushing on no matter what? How can we always be doing these things without ever taking a break? We human beings can't possibly maintain that level of intensity 24/7. Oh, come on, Germans. You know you could try though, right? That much stress would break down even the hardiest of us. How can we possibly follow Jesus' command? How can we individual Christians ever hope to live up to that standard? Well, that brings us to the point that I'm making here. Because guess what? We can't uphold those standards as individual Christians. There is no way we can keep that level of alertness 24/7. But we don't have to. Because we have a secret tool in our tool belt. Drum roll. We have the church. We have our local community of believers. Now, separately, I can't possibly fulfill all those commands. I can't stay alert all the time. I can't stay awake all the time. But together, we can. I can't be praying on my own ceasing without any ceasing, but I don't have to be, because we have Janet and Kathy, we have Corey, and we have Alec, and we've got Tyler, and we've got Shelley, and we've got everybody sitting in between those people. Together, we can be praying without ceasing. Together, we can be doing the work of mission 24/7. Now, that might be a little harder for us, Kathy. You and I are probably in trouble because it's just Ruth, you and I who are probably going to be doing things around midnight. But for everybody else, you've got a lot of other people to cover for the other parts of the time of the day. An individual can't be praying without ceasing on their own, but together we can. An individual can't be staying awake all the time, but together we can. An individual can't be constantly doing the work that Jesus has commanded them, but together we can. And that's why I know that the Christian message isn't just about me and my personal relationship with Jesus Christ, because alone I can't do all of these things. Only in Christian community can I do them. I need the church so that I can be faithfully obedient to Jesus' commandments to always stay awake, always stay alert. A few months back, I was fighting COVID and it wasn't going all that well. I was worn down, struggling to do my job as a pastor, but in that moment of frailty, I was reminded of an important message. Actually, this is probably one of those times where it's more like it hits you upside the back of your head. I'm not alone. And I rely on the church to support me and to do those things that I cannot. Because as an individual, I can't, and none of us can, stay alert and stay awake 24/7. But as a church community, we can. So as individuals, there is no way we can stay awake, stay alert all the time. But together, we can.